a number of things that have come out of that briefing, and we'll discuss here with our guests. I am joined in studio by political analyst Dr. Fikile, Vilakazi, and Mr. Sandile, Swana. Of course, IEC CEO Simon Mabolo saying that the IEC confirming that the results will be declared sometime this weekend, and he's also explained that the system that you saw this afternoon going down did not in fact crash this morning, and that no data has been compromised. Of course, there has been quite a number of concerns as it relates to that particular system, and he also concluded, of course, just giving that reassurance that the IEC takes responsibility for the entire electoral process. I think that is quite important given just what has been said about the IEC processes of this particular election. And of course, the IEC's chairperson, Musutu Muyabra, saying that they have several measures in place to ensure the integrity of the elections. Mr. Swana, perhaps let me start with you in as far as that briefing is concerned. Of course, they've also given us numbers in as far as how the vote counting is continuing, and we'll get into those numbers. But just overall impressions in terms of what has been said. I think it was very important perhaps for the IEC chairperson, Musutu Muyabra, to say that they have several measures in place to ensure the integrity of this particular elections, just given the high stakes.
Yes, obviously this election has got very high stakes. We've seen people who have been winning all the time losing, and I think the IEC as well as the political parties have behaved very well to make sure we're all safe, because elections can turn to violence once the integrity of the election is compromised. So indeed, there are measures in place. Computers have got an assortment of security measures that are taken. So indeed, it's going well, I think, in my judgment.
And you, Dr. Vilakazi, just your impressions in terms of how the IEC so far has handled this particular election and how they are addressing, on those issues that are creeping up.
I really think they've done a very good job. Honestly, even though there are queries around all the kinds of glitches that have been raised, they respond to that and they follow through where they can. And I think what is clear, Unati, is that most of the challenges that they are facing are legislative, but at an implementing level, they've done their part.
Let's look at the provinces, in terms of where we are in terms of counting. I mean, I want us to particularly focus on those provinces that we know there are some significant changes that we've seen. But just just touching on some provinces in terms of counting, they've given us the progress. The Eastern Cape is at 92.13% of the 4,484 voting districts that have been completed. Gauteng is at 75.33%. Mpumalanga is at 91.94%. Of course, the Northern Cape is at 100% with all of those districts then, having been declared. But let's look at the Northern Cape, in terms of just the picture that we are currently seeing. There are no outright winners in this particular election in as far as the Northern Cape is concerned. The voter turnout is being pegged at 58.45%, ANC coming in at 49.34%, followed by the DA at 21.19%, the EFF coming in at 13.25%. Perhaps let me start with you, Mr. Swana, just your impressions of what we are seeing in the numbers in the Northern Cape.
Yeah, I'm reminded as you read these numbers that the Northern Cape, by the way, in 1994, the ANC did not win the Northern Cape. In order to put in a ANC premier, it was the DP, before the DP became the DA, it was the DP that supported the ANC to win there. So we are back to square one in the Northern Cape because of poor service delivery. So it's a tragedy, but it means we're back to square one where we started in 1994.
Interesting. Dr. Vilakazi, of course, Dr. Zamani Soul, Premier of the Northern Cape for the ANC. It was predicted, of course, if the ANC won an outright majority, that he would likely have come back as the Premier of the Northern Cape. But what are we likely to see then, in terms of coalitions, as an example?
It's quite an interesting one because I think for me we're likely to see the EFF ANC coalition coming more strongly there, mainly because of the skepticism that lies between having a coalition with the DA. But I mean, it's something that they will need to negotiate, right? And then that may change dynamics because you know the EFF, in terms of the way that it's been negotiating, they actually want very, very strategic positions. So we may see changes in terms of who becomes the premier. They may probably negotiate the premier, and the DA is quite a different one. I want to believe that whatever happens in the Northern Cape will also be determined by what is happening at national level. But I agree with Prof that we are back to square one. I mean, I was looking at the national picture versus the Northern Cape as well, for instance. You will remember in 1994, we had a coalition government of the ANC, the National Party, and the IFP. You know, so we're sort of back to square one in terms of where we have been, of course with different dynamics and different variables. But I anticipate that we are likely to see the EFF there pushing stronger for a strategic position.